Hello, welcome to Sit and See. I'm Dr. Jared Jones. Research specialties are ancient systems of meditation, the cognitive science of meditation, Buddhist philosophy, and the philosophy of science. I've been a Tibetan Buddhist for about 21 years and practicing Taoism for another 6. And this class is about the invitation that the Buddha gave, which is for people to come and try for themselves, to try out the teachings for themselves. Not many people know this, but in the Buddhist tradition, meditation is taught as, even within its own tradition, something that is universally applicable. Meditation is taught as not strictly being a Buddhist thing, but as a thing that anybody who has the appropriate sort of ethical background and character and desire to train can be successful in. And so I teach this class primarily from a secular or non-religious perspective, although Q&A is unpredictable. Sometimes sometimes the class wanders a bit. That being said, we are here to help people understand, in particular lay people living in the real world, how it is that you train in meditation and have some success training in meditation in real life. So that's why we're gathered here today. Usually, for the first 15 to 30 minutes, I take questions from the audience and then we do our practices. And sometimes I take questions afterwards also, just depending on how things are going. So, for anyone who is, for anyone who's here, if no questions come in, hey Dave, welcome. If no questions come in, then I just ramble about whatever's on my mind until it's time to do our practice. So, what's on my mind if there's no questions today? Something that's on my mind is the relationship between ethics and meditation and character and meditation. If you're an extremely persistent person, you could have success in meditation through sheer force of will, let's say, under the conditions that you had the right information. If you had the right information through good teachers, good lineages, good books, a combination of these sorts of things, with great determination, you could brute force your way, let's say, through the process and continue leveling up as you did more and more and more. But most of us are not extremely determined. We're not going to be doing 4 hours or 8 hours a day just to get over the problems that come up. We're probably going to be doing 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, uh, most of our lives. That'll be how it is, right? Sometimes we'll do intensive practice, retreat, and so forth. But most of the time, probably it's going to be a lot less time than someone who's extremely determined, living in retreat, doing nothing but practice and resting so that they can do more practice. So, for such a person, ethics is a bit more natural, let's say, because you can't get into that much trouble, I don't think, relative to the real world. If you're living in a cave, there's just there's not that much trouble to get into relative to a person living in the real world who could lie and cheat and steal and do all sorts of things, right? So let me circle back to that, Dave. So in terms of ethics and the relationship to concentration and character and the relationship to concentration, if you look at the way that the bodhisattva perfections are laid out, concentration is number 5, not number 1. And a lot of people think I think they feel deep down somehow that if they're not training in meditation, they're not doing any real practice. But actually, meditation practice is put relatively far down the path. You know, it's not there at the beginning. It's a ways down the road. So, what comes before this? Ethics. What comes before this? Generosity. What comes before this? Perseverance. What comes before this? Patience. So there are a number of personal qualities that come before the perfection of concentration. So, yes, they're not strictly speaking in order, but why would generosity help you train in concentration? Well, from a psychological point of view, if you're really desperately clinging on to a lot of things with strong desire, that pulls you out of the meditative session. So generosity can help counteract that to some degree. Ethics means that you're doing what's skillful and avoiding what's unskillful. Welcome, sweet and sour. So if you took the commitment to not steal, let's say, so you decided I'm not going to steal. Okay, fine. Now, all throughout the day, you're thinking from time to time, I'm not going to steal that. I'm not going to take that. I'm going to be careful about my behavior. Part of your mind is working to remember your vows and then to apply what you know about your vows from your memory. I'm not going to steal. I'm not going to kill. Not going to lie. Not going to cheat. Uh, this sort of thing, right? So your vows end up acting as a natural support to training and meditation because if you kill somebody, your life is going to become pretty chaotic pretty quickly for most people, right? If you kill somebody, now you've got to deal with all the legal repercussions and personal repercussions of having killed someone. If you cheat on your romantic partner, now you have to deal with all the complexities that come along with having cheated on a romantic partner. And now you have the drama of, well, how do I deal with this? Now there's this third person involved, and maybe I'm going to hurt my partner. What if my partner finds out? Blah, 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 blah. If you lie about things, now you have to remember, okay, I lied to this person. I told this person the truth. Here was my lie. Here's what actually happened. I need to make sure that I only say the right things to the right groups of people. So your mental life becomes much more chaotic. And then, of course, if somebody finds out you lied about something consequential, yeah, then your life becomes chaotic again because now they're pissed off. Now you got to deal with the fact, oh, great, now this person's pissed off because I lied. How am I going to fix this situation? Blah, 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 right? So ethics, on the one hand, makes your life less chaotic because you didn't kill anybody, you didn't cheat on anybody, you didn't steal anybody's stuff, you didn't lie to anybody, and you didn't consume intoxicants, which led to you doing the other four things, right? If you get drunk, you're much more liable to kill somebody, steal something, cheat on your partner, and lie, generally speaking, right? Not that you're going to do those things, but if your ordinary mind, if you had no inclination to do those things, you might have a few beers and decide that one of those things might be okay, right? Because it's not you making the decision anymore. It's drunk you making the decision. So ethics makes your life less chaotic, which means that there's less nonsense you need to deal with, both in a practical sense and in terms of your own emotional palette, your own emotional life, which means that more of your sessions, when you sit down to do your practice, will be of a higher quality because you're not just fighting your own emotions and thinking about, oh man, how am I going to fix this situation where I screwed this thing up or that thing, because you have less ethical problems in your life. See what I mean? Does that make sense? So ethics is actually there to protect you. First of all, it protects you from yourself. Because I'm sure, if you're past a certain age, for most of us, probably there has been an occasion where you thought, well, it would be easier if I just did this wrong thing instead of doing the right thing. Or it would be more enjoyable, more pleasurable if I did this wrong thing instead of the right thing. In the short term, we can fool ourselves about all sorts of stuff, can't we? Yeah, Royce, that's exactly right. If you're not doing a lot of stuff that changes your perception of the situation, then your moral framework will stay more stable more of the time, and then you're not as likely to do stuff that you're going to regret later. So that's one of the aspects of not consuming intoxicants for sure. To a lesser degree, also things like gambling, and so on and so forth. That for some people can be addictive and whatever. But the overall point is your harmful actions create chaos, which makes your practice harder. Furthermore, if you're maintaining ethics, ethics trains your memory because you have to apply your ethical principles in the middle of your actual activities. You have to remember when you're at the grocery store or I don't know, you're at work or something, you have to remember, oh yes, I have this commitment to not steal, even though it'd be really easy to steal, and I could get away with it, and this and that. I'm not going to do that because I have this commitment to not do it, and you have to remember, ah, yes, this is my commitment. These are the constraints on my behavior, whatever. Or I could cheat, but I'm not going to cheat. I could kill, but I'm not going to kill. I could do this. I could lie to this person. I'm not going to lie to them. So, like this, your ethics is something that's training your memory, which this term mindfulness is actually doesn't mean moment by moment present awareness without judgment. What it means is memory. Sati, smrti, which is where this term mindfulness comes from, actually means memory, to remember. And it applies to both long term memory and active memory. So, you're training one of the mental factors, memory, that you need to be successful in meditation. So ethics and ethical commitments both make your life less chaotic. It causes you makes it so that you don't harm as many people and trains you in the mental factors that you need to be successful in meditation. So ethics are really important to your training. And then thinking about character, your personal character. If you have strong perseverance, determination, drive, that's one of the personal qualities you need to be really successful at anything, including meditation. If you have patience, meaning you have the ability to endure discomfort and pain and loss and so on and so forth in the short term to get an outcome that's positive that you want for you or other people in the long term, right? There's a lot of aspects to patience, but in terms of your training, this is the big one. Can you delay your gratification, right? Can you withstand not doing a bunch of stuff that you don't want to do most of the time in order to get something that's really great that you want later on? So, if you have perseverance and you have patience and you have ethics and generosity too, if you're training yourself to be a little bit less clingy in terms of your belongings through generosity, all of these things support your training in meditation. Yeah. So your personal qualities, your character, also your humility, as an example, right? If you're a very arrogant person, like I was when I was younger, then you don't seek out the advice of people who know things because you think, "Oh, I know better," or "I'm smart, so I'm just going to figure it out," or "I'm lucky, so when I try to do things as a capable and lucky person, somehow I just sort it out, even though everyone else has to get advice because they're not as smart and capable and great as I am." you know, whatever. I can just sort it out. So I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm going to do my own practice and meditation. I don't need anyone's advice. Like this, if you're arrogant, then you never seek out the people who know so much more than you about a subject that they've forgotten more than you're ever going to learn about it. You never seek out those people. And then instead of standing on the shoulders of giants to do your practice, you're starting from the ground floor. Instead of relying upon the collective wisdom and genius, literal genius of whatever, 300 generations of great practitioners passing along the very best advice so that you can make progress, you're starting over from the ground floor. Good luck. Life is short, you know? Yeah, I mean that's another aspect is the eightfold path. You know, if you have the right worldview, that leads to the right forming the right kinds of intentions and motivations, and so on and so forth. That can definitely help. But in any case, mainly sticking with just your personal qualities: humility, generosity, ethics, patience, perseverance. And you don't just wake up on a random Wednesday morning and suddenly have all those. You train them and you build them up along with your training and meditation. And some people have asked me a few times, sort of like, if well, do can I just come train with you and just only train with you and so on and so forth. And generally I say no, because all of the stuff that I'd put over here in rumination meditation, where you're transforming your character, most of that's going to come through a lineage of training. All of the topics you're going to ruminate on to change your character, and all the information you're going to digest to change your worldview, that to the to Luck's point, to then change your intentions, motivations, effort, and so on. That's going to come through a full-on lineage of study and practice. And then what I'm going to do, hopefully, for those who are interested in that sort of thing, is help you understand how do you take all this information from the lineage, digest it, and turn it into things that are actually what you are, instead of just being information. This is what I'm hoping I can add. And your lineage will teach you how to do that probably, but from my experience, they do that. Most lineages do that quite slowly. That process, might take 10 years instead of 6 months. And if you spend 10 years in a lineage and you already know how to use the information to transform your character from the beginning, those 10 years are going to be very different. Apex asks about philosophy. Uh, I mean, you could, yeah. I mean, a bit of training in philosophy can be good, although I find Western philosophy to be, uh, I don't know. It can give you the tools to think things through. It can do a good job in that regard. But most Western philosophers I've found to be sort of, besides the classic think, like perennialists, they tend to sort of go, well, we can't really know anything about anything, and everybody has a good point about everything, and everything sort of falls apart if you think about it long enough. So none of this really means anything, which is why I think it's falling apart as a discipline in large. It's falling apart as a discipline because if that's your position, that's kind of a meaningless position. If this stuff can't actually be tied in a satisfying way to how you should take action in your life and what the meaning and purpose of life is and so on and so forth, who cares? You know? Then again, I think that there are obviously, I mean, my PhD is a philosophical degree, and I was using Buddhist thought to argue for and against in various ways two different Western philosophers, and I thought it was a very useful exercise for my practice. But I was also starting that work with 15 years of practice already, So I don't know. I mean, it could be good. It's kind of up to you. If you're trying to get a job, don't study philosophy. you know, Study physics or something, and then become a philosopher after getting your physics degree. Okay, Oates asks about when to move on to the third foundation. So those of you who are new, the way that I teach meditation, I teach it in 5 parts. And I call them foundations because you can use these techniques as a foundation to do work in various lineages, to train in various lineages. So, generally speaking, I tell people this: if you're training in my techniques, probably you need a month or two with each technique before you start working on the next one, generally, unless you already have a fair amount of experience. And then the first technique you don't throw away, it becomes a tool for you to use in your practice as a more advanced practitioner, where you can grab your mind and pull it in really quickly. Likewise, body scanning becomes a tool that you can use to make the mind very calm very quickly if it's not behaving, or if the body feels uncomfortable, you can learn how to scan the body and make the body less painful, more comfortable, so you can get into your main practice, whatever it happens to be. um, since we live in the real world, I take the practice of body scanning and move it very quickly into standing and walking practice because you need to be able to take your practice off your cushion and do it a lot more of the time if you want it to have more serious results. You just have to put in more time. You've got to be able to get your practice from something that has a dosing effect in the morning or in the evening, whatever, and get it from something that's just provides a dose of a different sort of mind and transform or rather generalize that condition so that now it's a state. This is just how you are. And you become that way by training yourself to be more and more like that all the time. So instead of training in meditation where I do my meditation in the morning, your aim isn't to do that. It's your aim is to become more meditative. You're becoming more meditative in general. You're becoming a person who is all of their activities are within the scope of training their mind. Everything. So, when do you move on to the third technique? I mean, the main thing is, can you actually generate the same quality or similar quality, at least, of concentration doing a body scan in a seated position and a standing position? And then, if you can do that, can you then generate 5 points seated and standing with a relatively similar or the same quality of concentration? Then, if you can do that, then can you maintain that degree of concentration while walking with meditating on the 5 points? And then, how fast can you walk without losing that quality of concentration? Because if you can only do it for, if you have to walk like unbelievably slow in order to maintain that concentration, that's not a skill you can take outside your room without looking like a weirdo, right? So you're trying to train your mind more and more and more to be remaining in a state of concentration during everything you're doing because you have made it so natural that that's just how you do it now. And then the training starts doing you instead of you doing the training. Anyways, I know I'm not being very helpful. The just in terms of like specific advice for specific people, I like to take that on one by one, so we can talk about it. But um, I'd want to talk to you more personally and see what experiences you're having when you do certain practices, and that'll give me a better sense of. Hello, David. Welcome back. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you want the standing to become the concentration while standing to become just as good as when you're seated, or almost just as good, so that you could do 5 minute intensive breath and have it be quite good quality while standing, and then do a body scan and have it be quite good quality during during that standing session, and then move to 5 points and have the 5 points work relatively well while walking slowly and continue to speed it up until you can actually do it at full speed, at normal speed. So that's really the progression timeline. If you're not doing very much practice, that might take you 2 years. If you're doing practice every day and you're doing a fair amount of it, it might take you 3 months. you know, it kind of depends on the person. Anyways, hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully that's helpful. But yeah, we'll talk about it one on one, and I'll just, we can talk about what you're experiencing and so forth. Because I know you're doing other stuff too. You're doing some Lohan, and Lohan practice might make things happen more quickly too. And, you know, depends. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Let me just check and see if there are questions from the other forum that are relevant. Okay. Right. Well, since we spent a fair amount of time talking about standing walking practice, why don't we do a bit of standing walking practice today? Just so that those instructions are in your brain somewhere. Okay. So some of you may have not done practice of this kind before, so a few of the pieces of advice that I'm going to provide will be unusual to you, but hang in there. Hang in there. We did a lot of instruction on how to stand yesterday, so I'm not going to go over that again today. But there's a way of standing that's quite beneficial for a number of different reasons. So, as best you can, try to find a relatively relaxed posture. Your feet will be not out like this, forward. Also, you won't be standing like this. You want to have your feet widest would be shoulder distance. So, you're standing shoulder distance or hip distance, somewhere in there. And you want to feel as though the back third of the skull is rising slightly without doing the military neck thing where you pull your head back. You're just in the normal posture, but you just take your chin, that top joint of the neck, and you just lower it down. And then with your hips, I'll turn to the side. You don't want to go like this. You just take your hips from a stationary position, right? And I'll stick my butt out a little bit so you can see it. You just rotate the hips underneath the body. So if you look at my lower back, right? If that's my back sort of bent, right? You just bring the hips slightly under the body and the lower back stretches just slightly, but you don't want to round it. That you don't want to round it like this. That's not good. Okay? So the whole spine slightly stretched, feet forward. Take your arms, gently open the hands so they're not like noodles. They're just barely open, and then you touch your legs, your thighs. So this will allow you to avoid this kind of thing, which happens while you're standing. You end up sort of lopsided. So from here in our standing position, we'll do foundation one first, which is intensive breath meditation. So some of you already know the instructions for this, but I'll go over them very briefly. When you're doing meditation, there are several different approaches. If you have 3 or 4 days to let your mind calm down, you can take a very gentle approach. In real life, when your mind is stirred up, you need something stronger, more forceful to get the mind pulled in as quickly as you can because you don't have a lot of time. So the classics talk about this as using forceful intention or forceful conveying, bringing the attention to an object with great force. So, what does that look like? What it means is this: you take every ounce of your being as if your life depends upon it and try to cram it into the area, for example, a patch of skin inside your nostril. You just try to pack all of your attention into the area with as much force, as much intensity. I would say bordering on violent, powerful intent, pulling your mind to the place that you want it to be. Why do I use that kind of language? Because the great teachers that I learned this from literally said, imagine someone standing over you with a sword saying, I'm going to cut you in half if you lose your focus. With great intensity, bring your mind to the area you want it to be. And then, because it's still going to wander, count your breath from 1 to 7, 7 back down to 0, and that's going to be between the out breath and the in breath, and that will help you stay on the activity. So the counting is not a distraction from the activity. The counting is part of the activity. Okay. So here we go. Placing the mind on the breathing around the area of the nostrils with great intensity for a short time. So when I say begin, don't delay, don't screw around with your posture, don't change anything. Place your mind on that patch of skin with as much force as you can. Three, two, one, begin. When we transition to scanning the body, in the same way that you placed your attention on the tactile sensations of breathing, when I say place your attention in a part of the body, I don't mean visualize it. I don't mean imagine it. I don't mean try to figure it out. What I mean is feel the actual sensations that you feel in that part of the body. So, beginning with the feet, without imagining, without visualizing, without trying to figure anything out, just feel the actual sensations in the feet. So, with not quite the same intensity as you were using with the breath, but still a fair amount of force, place the mind's attention in the feet, ankles, calves, knees, lower thighs, upper thighs, the front and back of your pelvis, and then into your tailbone. The anus, perineum, the sexual organs, into the waist, front and back, into the diaphragm region, front and back, into the chest, front and back, and then into the tops of your shoulders, front of your shoulders, including your collarbones, side of the shoulders, and the back of the shoulders, including the scapula. Bicep region, elbows, forearms, wrists, hands, and fingers, fingertips, now the lower third of your neck, middle third of your neck, the upper third of the neck, the joint between the neck and the skull, and then the back of your skull, left side, right side. And for the sake of time today, just put your attention into the entirety of the face and the ears, and then into the top of your skull. Now, from the top of the skull, without losing the awareness of the top of the skull, stretch the awareness down to your hands so that you feel your hands and the top of your skull. And then stretch your awareness down from the top of the skull again to the feet so that you can feel your hands, your feet, and the top of your skull. Now we're going to transition to walking meditation. When you walk, if you need to walk this slowly, and before we begin walking, don't shake out your legs, don't shake out your feet. The sensations there will go away on their own. If you need to walk this slowly to not lose the 5 points, then walk this slowly. But you want the quality of concentration that you've built up to this point to remain the same. If it starts to become less, or you lose track of the hands, or you lose track of the feet, or you lose track of the top of the head, stop, reestablish the full intensity of the concentration on all 5 points, and then carry on moving probably a little more slowly than you were. So you don't want to increase the speed until the quality of the concentration catches up with the speed that you're moving. So since I've been doing this a couple weeks, you'll see me moving at full speed, but go at the pace you can actually go and stop if you lose concentration on the 5 points. Okay? Okay. So, like this, I hope some of you noticed that it was much more difficult to generate a relatively good state of concentration with, how to say, with the increasing demand in terms of what your body's doing. It gets harder to generate the same level of concentration you had if you were in a seated position, right? So this is why you need to train. You need to train seated, you need to train standing, you need to train walking, you need to train lying down. Lying down is difficult because you have a tendency to fall asleep. But you need to train in the various positions of real that you find yourself in real life. And then over the course of time, your concentration will get better in each of the positions that you regularly find yourself in. And yeah, as Dave said, as you start trying to do even the simplest of moving things while keeping the mind highly concentrated, the concentration starts to degrade. So it takes time to build up the skills of having more and more complex kinds of activities available to you while maintaining that same concentrated state of mind. Jay, wisdom is mind. Not a bad name. Top two benefits: nirvana and enlightenment. Those are the top two benefits. Uh, but those might be too boring. Those might be too boring. So I'll have to come up with some better ones for you. So since I think Dave and Jay, you guys are both doing the Lohan material, right? So when you're doing your standing practice, when you're doing your standing practice, for example, you can sometimes you can do the Negong on the inside where you're releasing. Sometimes when you're doing your standing, you can do the 5 points. Sometimes when you're doing your standing, you can do body scanning. Yeah, when you're standing, luck, when you're standing, especially if you stand properly, it changes your body. And so, yeah, things will happen. Feeling your body warm up is quite normal when you're doing that kind of practice. And feeling a lot of heat, in particular in your feet and your legs, is quite normal. And again, it goes away. It's for the first year or two, it's like that, and then your legs and your feet change. Let's see. So as you get better and better at taking your concentration into more activities, for those of you doing Lohan style practice, or for those of you who have a yoga practice, or who dance or do other things, you can start taking your skills in concentration into more and more of your activities. Just make sure that if you're lifting or something, make sure that you're putting the ordinary type of focus into that activity, and you don't get distracted by trying to do weird things with your attention. Because if you're lifting heavy objects or operating heavy machinery or crossing the street or driving a car, it's better to just focus on what you're doing in a totally normal sense, so that you don't end up hurting yourself or hurting someone else. As a quick disclaimer. But when you're doing Lohan practice, for example, and you're moving the body in a particular way, you can start working with the different ways of putting concentration into the body. So once you can do Mahamudra style practice on just tactile sensation, you can put the awareness through the whole body while you're doing the various movements of your martial form or your yoga practices if you have them, or whatever it is, whatever else you happen to be doing. So that I find that to be a very skillful approach. And then once you can do it with vision and hearing, in particular, vision, hearing, very helpful. If once you can do it with vision and hearing simultaneously, then when you're talking to people, when you're listening to people, when you're walking from place to place, if you can put your attention in hearing and in vision and in tactile, and you can have all three of them open or two of them open, then you can train in concentration quite well while you're just walking from place to place or talking to people or running your business from day to day. So this is a very very good approach to getting more practice in while you're doing other things. Okay. I wonder if we scared wisdom away. We probably did scare wisdom away. Okay, okay. A couple of questions and then we'll wrap it up. Um, yes. So when you're training in something like Mahamudra style practice, as you get better at feeling what the body is, that obviously that practice is going to change. If you're extending it through vision, in the beginning it'll be quite awkward, but you get better and better at extending it in six directions. And therefore your vision in general changes, but you get better and better at opening the entire visual field, and that's not going to be the same on year 1 versus year 10. That's why I tell most people if you're going to do my stuff, probably like 4 or 5 years before you're relatively competent in the stuff that I teach, you know? Like you can go through the curriculum and have some taste of everything within maybe 8 months, but then you have to sort out how to actually do it all and make it all work and then what to do and when and blah blah blah, and that takes more time. And so for it to mature a little bit, maybe 4 or 5 years. Okay. Taste, smell, six directions. How do you get that info? So, Luck, that's part of the Five Foundations course. That's on my YouTube under the Five Foundations of Meditation. There's a playlist on my YouTube. But what I would recommend is if you want to train in my stuff, then go through it one topic at a time. So you would go through Foundation 1, spend 2 or 3 months on it, and then talk to me personally and tell me what's going on in your practice so that I can let you know if you're doing it properly or not. And there are certain things that will tell me if you're doing it properly, and it's better if I don't tell you what those are and you just come to me one day and you say certain things and then I go, "Yep." Yep, that's the right thing. And then you can start adding on other stuff. And for most people that's, somewhere between 10 days and 2 months they start getting signs that that practice is doing what it's supposed to do. And then you can add on the next thing, which is body scanning, and you can do it seated at first, and then do it standing, and then do it walking. And that's again foundation 2 and foundation 3. Probably a good pace to take that on if you're doing 30 minutes or an hour a day. A good pace to take that on is again a month or two with each of those practices, building them up so that you can get a real taste of them. And then And then the Mahamudra style practices. So to actually be able to do those practices, you already need a mind that's relatively calm and has some stability to it, because it's really difficult to get your mind to open the senses. It's much more difficult to have your mind rest on an entire sensory field than it is for your mind to just focus in on one little aspect. You know, to focus on this is much easier than telling your mind, I don't want you to focus on any object in particular, just zoom out and abide as what you are without doing anything in particular. That's very hard relative to asking it to just zoom in on one thing. So you need to have some competence to really be able to do that properly. You need to already have some competence in terms of meditative skill, I think. The classics say you can just jump straight into that if you want, but I think it's beneficial to have a few other pieces in place and to take it step by step. And then yeah, within that is the six direction style practice. So you're learning how to open your awareness in six directions. Okay, concentration versus mindfulness. Mindfulness is a mental factor. It's mindfulness means memory, refers to both long-term and short-term memory, has very little, almost nothing to do with present moment by moment awareness. By the way, you've never had a moment of awareness that wasn't in the present moment. So it's not possible to have anything other than present moment awareness. And the Buddha tells you should judge all sorts of things in your experience. So your mindfulness should be neither can your awareness can be nothing other than present moment awareness, and you should be judging stuff all the time. So mindfulness has very little to do with present moment non-judgmental awareness. Actually, it has to do with memory. I need to remember that I want a specific outcome in the future, and therefore I'm going to judge certain things in the present moment based upon standards I learned in the past from someone else. And I need to actively remember to apply those judgments in the present moment so that a future outcome will occur. So it's about thinking about the past, thinking about the future, and applying judgments to the present moment. That's mindfulness. It's the exact opposite of the definition you've heard. You can use mindfulness to generate concentration. Concentration means, well, it means a lot of things, but gosh, from a Buddhist standpoint, the term that's translated as concentration, actually, your awarenesses have concentration all the time. So it's a little, again, it's a little bit weird in terms of translation, but if you're talking about shamatha, if you're talking about perfect single pointed concentration, at the level of basically a meditating mind, like an actually stable meditating mind, what's being discussed there is a mind that is highly stable, highly lucid, unbiased, and knowing and skillful, that has a distinct quality of not adding or subtracting qualities from the object of its perception, and is characterized by mental and physical suppleness. That is a meditating mind. Highly lucid, highly stable, unbiased, knowing, skillful, with a distinct quality of not adding or subtracting qualities from the object being known, characterized by mental and physical suppleness. That is a meditating mind. Everything else is training that leads to a meditative mind. Everything else you're doing is training that leads to having a mind that is meditating in terms of a concentrated, stabilizing meditation. Until it has all those qualities, it's not yet a meditating mind. So if it's dull, it's not a meditating mind. If it's unstable, it's not a meditating mind. If it doesn't have mental and physical suppleness, it might have all of the other qualities of a meditating mind, but it's not a fully mature meditating mind yet. If it's a mind that's biased and adding and subtracting things from the object of perception, That's not a meditating mind. That's just your normal conceptual mind that's adding and subtracting stuff from the object. So, yeah, in terms of definition of shamatha, of an actual highly concentrated, a mature concentrated state, it's quite a demanding definition. Right mindfulness. I mean, mindfulness basically, again, it means memory, right? So it's keeping the right things in mind, remembering to do the right stuff, remembering to apply the right judgments. When you see in the canon and when you're looking at mindfulness of death, what does that mean? Well, in the canon it says when you see a dead body, remember that your body is going to be like that in the future. So think about it, right? You heard in the past your teacher say, the next time you see a dead body, remember that your body in the future is going to be like that. Remember to apply the judgment. I don't want to miss out on my practices because I'm attached to my body when it's going to look like that in the future. Instead, I want a different outcome in the future, which is that I did my practices and I achieved success. So I'm going to apply the judgment that I learned in the past from my teachers to death and to my own body when I see a dead body. That's mindfulness. You're remembering to bring the right things to mind when you have certain experiences. Likewise, if you're training in concentration, you need to remember the instructions you heard. You need to judge what's occurring in the present moment. Ah, this is dullness. I see my mind sinking. What's the solution to dullness? Well, I need to do this or this or this. Oh, this is instability. My mind's trying to jump. Okay, what do I do with instability? I need to apply more force of concentration. So you need to recall from the past, long-term memory. Here's the instructions I got on this. Here's what this is. You need to look at it and judge what's going on and then apply the antidotes based upon information from the past in order to achieve an outcome that's coming in the future. So there's very little to do with present moment by moment non-judgmental present oriented awareness to this idea of mindfulness actually. It I don't know how they got this so wrong when they transferred this idea to the West in the 1960s. But we're kind of stuck with the wrong idea now because everywhere you go, I'm sure if you ask Google right now, somebody should do this actually. If you ask Google right now what mindfulness is, it'll tell you that it's present moment non-judgmental awareness or moment by moment present moment blah 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 blah. Somebody can Gemini it and put it in the chat. But that's wrong. That's not what it means. And if you think that's what it means, then you're going to have problems in your training. Mm. Okay. So, how to meditate without meditating? Uh, there are ways where you're not doing much formal practice to make a lot of progress, but basically, you have to have an extremely intense physical or verbal discipline that is not your decision to do whatever you want. It has to be basically imposed upon you from the outside, where, for example, you're going to do some type of classical training in art as an example, and you don't get to decide to do whatever you want. You have to maintain intense awareness of what you're doing and apply rules and guidance and blah 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 that aren't your decision to freely make up whatever you want, so that there is a right way and a wrong way to do it. And because there's a right way and a wrong way, you notice, my attention was wrong because I made a mistake here. I need to pay even more attention and go back and do it again. So this is how something like training in martial arts becomes an assisting thing for training in meditation. You can't just do your form however you want. Yeah, exactly. That's not what it means. Yeah, attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment is absolutely wrong. It's absolutely backward. Hold on. Uh, Uh, sati. Oh, you know what would be fun? Here, do this. Somebody search this next. Somebody search that, Gemini or whatever, and it should be short. Put that definition in the chat. Or this one too. Definition of sati. Okay. So, yeah, can you train some degree of concentration? Yeah, the Hindus are fantastic at this. Training in music, training in dance, training in art, training in certain types of academic disciplines. The Chinese are quite good at this too. If you look at all sorts of practices like calligraphy, in Japan, tea ceremony, flower arranging, swordsmanship, archery, you name it. There are dozens and dozens of disciplines that are at the intersection of training and concentration and some type of physical or verbal or physical and verbal discipline. No, but that's the point. It's not, well, anyways, it has nothing to do with that. Mindfulness is not about being fully present. You can't be anywhere but in the present moment. And it might have nothing to do with being aware of where you are and what you're doing. If you if you are thinking about the fact that you're going to be your body's going to be decaying just like the body that's in front of you in the future, your body's going to be decaying like that, you're no longer paying attention to what's happening in the present moment. You're thinking about the future and the fact that your body will be like that in the future. You're no longer paying attention to what you're doing here and now. And overly reactive, you should be extremely reactive to this. Ta-da! You should be extremely reactive to the fact that your mind, that your body is going to look like that in the future, because that becomes a motivating factor for you to do more practice and for you to be less attached to your body. So you should be judgmental, highly reactive. It should be overwhelming, the feeling. If your hair was on fire, would that be an overwhelming experience? Because the Buddha said your motivations on the path should be as if your hair is on fire. This is what your mindfulness should give birth to, a feeling like your hair is on fire. Isn't that overwhelming? So it's totally backwards. It's about memory, it's about thinking about the future, thinking about the past, judging the present, generating overwhelming feelings that are highly reactive to what's going on. It is absolutely the opposite of what you should be doing. Likewise, sati, yeah? Sati, wholesome mental factor characterized by what? Not forgetting, not floating away from an object of knowledge. You decided in the past, I'm going to remember as soon as I see a dead body, my body will look like this one day. Right? My body will be like this one day. And therefore, I shouldn't put too much emphasis on the body in terms of, oh, I want to look really amazing and blah, 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 and because my body's going to be like this no matter what I do. So I need to use the body skillfully to accomplish the goals of training internal things. No, again, mindfulness is memory. Look at the definition. Sati, mindfulness, a wholesome mental factor characterized as not forgetting, of remembering. Remembering stuff. It's about memory. You're just remembering. You're remembering things. It has nothing to do with present moment, blah, 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 blah. None of that is in the definition. It's about memory, remembering things, actively remembering what you intended to do, and remembering, recalling information from the past relevant to what you intended to do. What did you intend to do? Reduce your attachment to the body. What information are you recalling from the past to do that? My teachers told me that when I see dead bodies, I should remember my body's going to look like this too one day, and therefore blah, 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 blah. Smrti, same term, but in Sanskrit, mental factor of recollection, not forgetting, continuous centering of the mind on a wholesome object. Ta-da! Nothing to do with present moment non-judgmental awareness. It's about memory, remembering things. Mindfulness has nothing whatsoever to do, in terms of its definition, with present moment non-judgmental awareness. And now think about this, okay? Now that you know the definition of sati smarti, go back and read the suttas and sutras. No, sati is Pali. Sati is the Pali term from the Pali canon, from the Theravada canon. Smrti is Sanskrit from the Sanskrit Abhidharma canon. But now when you go back and you read the suttas and sutras that are about mindfulness, you won't be confused when the hold on, let me pull one up. Great Maha Satipatthana Sutta. Mm, so I don't think I can get the whole thing in here. I think it's gonna YouTube's going to cut it off. Okay, but I'm putting in the chat. So this is from the Satipatthana Sutta, right? So the cemetery contemplation. Thus, O bhikkhus, one lives contemplating the body. Further, O bhikkhus, if a bhikkhu, or in whatever way, sees a dead body 1, 2, or 3 days, swollen, blue, festering, thrown in the charnel ground, he thinks of his own body thus. This body of mine, too, is of the same nature as that body. It's going to be like that body and has not gone past the condition of becoming like that body. Right? So, what are you doing with mindfulness? You're recalling information from the past, judging the present, in order to create effects relative to the future. Look at what he's saying. In the future, I need to remember from the past what my teacher told me so I can judge the present, so that I can imagine a future where I'm going to be like something in the future that isn't what's happening in the present moment. My body's not like that right now, right? So mindfulness, sati, means remembering, judging, thinking about the future. All of these activities related to not forgetting or remembering something that is virtuous, something that is skillful, something that's worth cultivating. So this is in the great sutta on mindfulness, the Satipatthana Sutta. Right? Here it is, you know? And listen, further, O bhikkhus, if a bhikkhu in whatever way sees whilst it is being eaten by crows, hawks, vultures, dogs, jackals, or by different kinds of worms, a body that has been thrown in the charnel ground, he thinks of his own body. This body of mine too, so on and so forth, is not past the position of becoming like that body. Thus, he lives contemplating the body in the body internally, and he lives contemplating the body in the body externally, so on and so forth. Further, if he sees a body thrown in the charnel ground, reduced to a skeleton, so on and so forth, Further, if he sees a body reduced to a blood smeared skeleton, so on and so forth. Further, if he sees a skeleton held only by tendons, so on and so forth. Further, if he sees, and it goes on and on and on, right? So, sati, smrti, mindfulness is not about at all present moment by moment awareness without judgment. It's about memory, remembering or not forgetting something in particular. And that may involve judging things in the present moment. And it may even involve, I need to remember that when I see this, I should think about the future in a particular way. So it's not about moment by moment, present moment, non judgmental awareness or anything like that, non reactive moment. Because the point of thinking about the skeleton in the charnel ground is not to be non reactive to the skeleton, it's to react where you go, my body's going to be like this. I'm running out of time. I need to do my practices. And I shouldn't be attached to making the body absolutely beautiful and perfect and eating organic food every day and neurotic about absolutely everything that comes into the body because the body's going to die. You can't take it with you. Yeah, mindfulness has more aspects. It does. No, I'm talking about right mindfulness of death. So when you start applying it to something like being aware of feeling, how is memory involved? Well, you need to remember when I encounter feeling, I'm going to relate to that feeling in this way. I'm going to keep my mind in this condition when I encounter feeling. When I encounter this state of concentration, I'm going to apply these instructions that I learned from the past. When I encounter this concentration, I'm going to apply a different set of instructions I learned in the past. And then I'm going to compare these two based upon instructions I learned in the past. I'm going to remember those and apply it to these two things that I encounter. And I'm going to relate with those two things in this way because that's beneficial for my training heading into the future. So it involves being aware of stuff, judging stuff, reacting to stuff, thinking about the future, imagining the future, remembering the past. It has all sorts of aspects. But if you think the definition is present moment by moment awareness of what's happening without judgment or reaction, you're going to miss all of this content that's here in the sutra. If you think it has to do with memory and not forgetting what you're supposed to be doing at each stage of the process, then it makes perfect sense. Okay. Are we ruminating now? We're just talking about the mental factors involved in meditation. This has turned into a little bit of an academic discussion. Is it memory of reality? Sorry, let me go back because I was talking for a while. Past is gone, future is not yet here. Yeah, that's true. But, also, sorry, I missed quite a bit, it seems. How to overcome sloth. How did you come to it besides realization that most texts are grounded for retreat settings so that, how did I put it together? Um, I just did a lot of stuff that didn't work for a long time. And then I looked at the instructions I had gotten over a long period of time and started applying different kinds of instructions in different orders and so on and so forth and thinking about it until I got a package, let's say, of practices that were actually producing results. And instead of taking years and years and years, those results started happening more quickly. And then as I looked back at the text with that in mind, the reason that those things would work quickly started to make more sense. But, I spent years with things not working. Was part of the reason I'm doing this is I don't want other people to have to go through the same thing. All right. Past is gone, future is not yet. That is true. That is true in terms of the ontology of the past and the future, but that doesn't mean you don't need to think about it. I mean, if you don't think about the future, or the past, you're going to turn into like a lump on a log. you know, you need to spend some time thinking about things in a skillful way, thinking about the past in a skillful way, thinking about the future in a skillful way, planning in a skillful way. Probably, if you don't make plans, you're never going to do serious practices because it takes time, effort, money. You've got to sort out how to do it and get your life oriented so that you can do it. Otherwise, you don't do it, right? So that takes planning. Maybe it also takes thinking about the past and thinking about what worked and what didn't work in past experience when you tried to do it. So you need to be thinking about the past and the future. You just want to be doing it in a skillful way and at the appropriate time. Jay says it can feel a bit like fire in the head. Yeah, yeah. If you're putting in a lot of effort to Foundation 1 in particular, you can feel a little bit of pressure building in your head, but it goes away. And as you do more body scanning, it'll go away even more, especially if you're standing and doing body scanning. David, is it present moment identification of the subconscious mind? So mindfulness is memory. It's remembering what you're intending to do in the present moment and recalling all the information from the past that's relevant to the thing you're trying to do in the present moment. So if you're trying to maintain your attention on the breath, you heard instructions on how to do that in the past. You then have to remember what the instructions are and actively apply them in the present moment. Likewise, as problems come up in the meditation and the mind isn't behaving, right? Then you have to remember from the past, oh yeah, my teacher told me that when my mind is going crazy, I have to like grab it and squeeze it in even harder into the place I'm trying to focus. Or my teacher told me that when I'm trying to focus and the mind is becoming dull and sleepy, that I need to do something to brighten the mind up, freshen the mind up, because it's not good to sit in a dull, sleepy, blank state of mind. And that's information coming from the past. So, on the one hand, you're actively remembering what you're doing now. On the other hand, you're judging what's happening now based upon information you learned in the past. So, there's basically nothing about mindfulness that has to do with non judgmental, present moment, non reactive awareness. You should react right away. If you notice that your mind is running away and you remember your teacher saying your mind shouldn't run away, you shouldn't sit there in a non judgmental state. Oh, yes, I see it running away, but I'm at peace. No, you're not. Your mind is running away. No, you should react immediately. Bang, pull it in, right? That's the instruction. I remember my teacher said, pull my attention in right away. Bang, right? You should be highly reactive with your mindfulness, applying what's relevant right away. Okay. Intoxication of youth, beauty, health. Yeah, yeah. So if you're getting too distracted by various kinds of things, youth, beauty, health, etc., that if that's pulling you off of your practice, then you want to make sure you're keeping the balance right, Because also it can be good to have a body that feels youthful if you're using it well. It's a resource. It can be a body that can be very useful to have a body that's healthy. If you're using it well, it's a resource. It can be wealthy to have plenty of food, plenty of clothing, plenty of whatever. If you're using it well, it's a resource. If you're not using it well, then it can be a hindrance. records and anchors awareness of reality in the present moment. It's impossible for you to have an awareness in reality of any other moment but the present moment. Even if you're becoming aware of future possibilities, you're doing that in the present moment. Even if you're becoming aware of events in the past, you're doing that from the point of view of the present moment. Everything that you experience is always in the present moment. There's no such thing as an awareness other than an awareness occurring in the present moment. It's just not there. This idea of present moment non judgmental awareness just isn't a thing. It's not a real thing. And if you get that out of your head and you start fresh and start thinking about these issues from the point of view of the terms actually used in the Buddhist canon, then it will start making more sense and you can make more progress more quickly. Like even the only reason I know this is because I spent a year reading all the scientific literature on this. Even according to cognitive scientists who are partly to blame for this misunderstanding of mindfulness that we have, they say that the definition for the term has all sorts of problems, even according to them. And you know why it has problems? Because it's not the definition provided by the traditions from which the techniques that you're studying were extracted. So they extracted techniques to study. They misdefined, they put the wrong definitions on the terms being used to study it. And now they're complaining and upset that they have problems in their studies and that they need to adjust the definitions. If they had started with the correct definitions, probably the research would have proceeded more quickly. But for example, if you have unbelievable mindfulness, remembering that your intent was to keep the mind focused fully and intensely on consciousness and the contents of consciousness, you might forget everything that's happening around you. You might become unaware of everything that's happening around you. But according to the definition you gave me, Jay, from AI, that would mean you have no mindfulness because you're not aware of what's happening around you. That's a problem, isn't it? Doesn't this tell you there's a problem with the definition of mindfulness if being in a single pointed concentrated state on consciousness doesn't qualify as mindfulness? Anyways, I digress. So mindfulness means memory. It doesn't mean present moment non-judgmental awareness. Right. Could it also be, yeah, that's a type of mindfulness, Jay. So when you're recalling information from the past to frame or understand or judge present moment experience, that's mindfulness. When you're actively remembering in the present moment to carry out a certain kind of activity, that's mindfulness. Some types of mindfulness are good, some types of mindfulness aren't good. This is why the Buddha said you need to train in right mindfulness. You need to use your memory in the right way to take you down the path. You could use your memory in a way that takes you the opposite direction, obviously, right? You could use your memory to create lots of negative emotions for yourself. You could use your memory actively in the present moment to be a really good sniper. Like you get really, really good at aiming your gun and you know the person you're supposed to kill because you remember, yeah, I read the brief. It said I'm supposed to kill this guy with the red hat. And there's the guy with the red hat. And I'm not going to lose my concentration on this guy with the red hat. And when the moment is right, I'm going to kill him. Right? That's wrong mindfulness. You're actively remembering in the present moment, actively not forgetting in the present moment that you're going to kill this person, recalling a bunch of past information that's making it possible you can actually kill the person, and then you kill them. That's wrong mindfulness. And look, there's even concentration there too. And maybe you even have moment by moment non-judgmental, non-reactive awareness. Good job. But that's not right mindfulness because you're using your memory to kill somebody. Okay. Let's see. Wisdom. I think something is missing to judge and make decisions. We need our ultimate consciousness to compare present, make final decisions in the future. So how do we get past conscious? Yeah. Well, that's a little bit different, right? So if you want to have better judgment, you need a couple of things. You probably need to understand whatever it is that you're trying to judge. You need to understand that issue fairly well. If you don't know what all the moving parts of that thing are that you're trying to judge, or as many as you can, then your judgment of it won't be very good. So you need to understand, like think about something simple like trying to grow wheat. If you're trying to grow uh, whole wheat, right? Or let's just say winter wheat, right? If you understand the relationship between the wheat and the soil and the wheat and the types of bugs that like to eat wheat, and you understand that and the weather cycles and blah 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 blah, then you can have very good judgments, very good decisions about, okay, I should add more fertilizer, I should do this, I should do that, because you understand the thing itself and its relationship to other things. And if you've been doing that 15, 20, 30 years, then you have wisdom, which is you start to develop sort of an instinct for what the right thing to do is, even when sometimes you can't describe it fully. Just because you've been doing it so long, you have really good judgment based upon stuff. Sometimes you're not even aware of all the stuff that you're aware of. You've just been like, you see something subtle happening and you go, oh, you know what? I saw that 20 years ago and it led to this. So I'm going to do this to stop that from happening. I'm going to do this other thing to stop that from happening, just in case. So then it becomes sort of wisdom, right? It's much more mature. So if you want to have better judgments, you need to understand what it is that you're doing, both in terms of its particular aspects and its relationships to other things. That's one element. Another element is you also need to improve the thing that's doing the judging and the observing, which has to do with training and concentration. So if you have a mind that's highly stable, highly lucid, is adding and subtracting way less stuff from your experience, is not getting as caught up in arrogance and anger and blah blah blah, and is able to just observe what's going on and see it clearly, and then remember from the past things that are relevant to what you're looking at, then your mind will make much better judgments about what to do than someone's mind who's not like that, as a general principle, right? There are some other things that might come into play, but okay. Does practice transform an enduring self, or does it gradually dismantle the illusion that there was ever an independent self to transform? So we're getting a little bit away from people's day-to-day actual practice of stuff. Uh, No, I mean generally speaking, I've said this before, generally speaking, if even if you start gaining experiences that are just introductory level non-duality experiences, which if you're training in a good system should start to happen within 6 months or a year. Most of my students who train at least 30 minutes or an hour a day, somewhere in there, within that period of time, they start having sort of introductory non-dual kinds of experiences that will show you directly that the type of self you thought was there isn't there. So furthermore, once you can do that with all six of your senses, once you can do it with your central consciousness and each one of your external consciousnesses, then you can actually look for where that self is that seems to be there when you're not paying attention. Oh yes, sort of like the cup. You look at the cup and you go, there's something about this that makes it a cup. Okay, fine. You say there's something about it that makes it a cup. No problem. Where is that thing? Is it in this side of the cup? How is it that you know it's a cup when you look at this side? If it's only in this side. If it's only in if okay, so no, it goes through the whole thing. Okay, fine. So if I scratch it like this and I've removed a few of the parts now because some of the atoms were removed, it's not a cup anymore, right? Well, wait a minute. You said it was all the parts together that made it a cup, and now it's lost some of the parts, so it shouldn't be a cup, right? So it's not one particular part of it making a cup. It's not all the parts together making it a cup. The cup certainly isn't outside the cup, so it had to be in here somewhere, but it's not among the parts, and it's not the parts. Where is it? No, it's not the atoms. It's not the atoms because if I remove a few of the atoms, it's still a cup, right? I removed some of the quarks. Some of the quarks went with the atoms. So we have this thing where we see things existing in ways they don't exist. But if you can look at the actual components making up your being, you can start looking at yourself and looking for that self in the places it could exist, and you can see whether or not it's there. From direct experience, you can see, well, it's not in this part, it's not in that part, it's not over here, it's not over there. And you can at least in the beginning arrive at a correct conceptual understanding of selflessness. And I hear that when you do that, it doesn't, it's not like you don't exist afterwards. You do exist, but the way you exist is different than you thought. Well, no, it's not causality either, because that would mean that at some time in the past, this cup came into existence as a cup. Okay, then where is it? Because it's not the parts, it's not independent from the parts. So where is it? Where is this cup you say came into existence due to causality if it's not the parts and it's not the collection of parts? Sorry, if it's not the collection of parts and it's not among the parts, where is this cup you say is there? To go a little bit bigger, because it's easier to understand, where is the mountain? If you say it came into existence due to causes and conditions, where does it begin and end? What parts are included? What parts aren't included? You have no idea. It's the same with you. You actually have no idea which parts are included or not included. Yes, that's right. Things don't exist as perceived, but you have to be much more specific than that. It's not good enough to just say they don't exist as perceived. You have to actually have the ability to directly cognize what each of your senses is, what your visual consciousness is, what your hearing is, what your smell is, what your taste is, what your tactile sensation is, what your consciousness is, what your mental content is. And then you look, well, is it here? Is it there? Is it in this part? Is it in these? And even just having non-dual experiences of each of your senses will be a radical shift in your way of thinking about yourself. Because here's the thing. Right now, you think you are your senses, and you think you are your thoughts, and you think you are your emotions, and you think that you own those somehow and that they're mixed up with what you are. And that will be very, very clear to you with a relatively easy to generate experiences. It'll become very clear to you that that's not true. It's like not even close to true. And that is a like a radical shift in your way of thinking about yourself. And that's long before to answer Gong Show's question. That is this is long before you've even dealt with the real problem of seeing yourself as inherently existent. The story overlay is the distraction and much of the cause for suffering. I wish it was. I wish it was just the story that we tell ourselves. It's much more than that, unfortunately. It's much more difficult to get at than that because in your best states of concentration, ignorance is there. It's not just concepts, and it's not just the story you tell yourself about yourself. It's a misperception. It's a misknowing of the thing. It's not a misconception. It's misperceiving or misknowing what's there. So it's not just that you have the wrong idea and that you tell yourself the wrong story about it. If it was, then you could just change philosophies. Well, we're getting a bit into more like open Q&A, which is not the point of this class. So we'll have another Q&A soon, I promise. Okay? So let's wrap it up here. Thank you all for coming. Try not to die until I see you again. Hope to see you again very soon. Cheers.